I'm Jackie Carrera with the Santa Barbara Foundation, and you're watching The Good Life.
Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you're with us. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org, where you can see all the interviews. There's over 100 wonderful people, all walks of life, business, philanthropy, overcomers. It's an amazing group. So all those interviews are there in the long form, and then you can also see what we call power clips, where you can get kind of some of the gold from those interviews. But we've loved seeing so many of you from all over the world join us at goodlifetelevision.org, as well as our social media site. So thank you, and we're so glad you're with us. I'm really excited about my guest today. Jackie Carrera is with me. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jackie's the president and CEO of the Santa Barbara Foundation, which is Santa Barbara is where we're sitting, and has been for the last couple of years. We're going to talk about that. Prior to joining the foundation, Jackie was the president and CEO of the Parks and People Foundation in Maryland for over 2 decades, where that organization became a major national leader in many areas in urban parks and recreation, ecosystem research and education, job training, workforce development. We were talking before we came on about some of the stuff that they did. It's phenomenal. So Jackie came out here to work at the Santa Barbara Foundation, but not as the president and CEO. And so we were talking before we came on. You came out, and then you ended up 2 years in becoming the leader, and there wasn't much of a honeymoon. They greeted you with a worldwide pandemic. Talk about your kind of the first couple of years here.
Well, I was thrilled to be able to come in and work under our former president and CEO, Ron Gallo. He had a long history in community foundations, and my role was to be the Chief Revenue and Business Development Officer. And in community foundations, we're sort of a hybrid between private foundations and regular old nonprofit organizations. We don't do direct service, so what we do is we raise money and we engage donors throughout our community to pool resources and mobilize resources, and then invest them in our nonprofit organizations and in our nonprofit sector to do just incredible work all throughout our county. So my job was to bring in the money and meet our donors and figure out how we could match their charitable interests with the needs in our community.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to ask. If you're a donor or even, I did this job, I was a financial advisor. I'm sure you work with a lot of financial advisors.
Yeah.
What's the benefit? So to speak, I mean, let's pretend like somebody's never heard of the Santa Barbara Foundation and they're a donor, they're a high net worth, or they're a financial advisor. What's the benefit of working with Santa Barbara Foundation?
Yeah. So first of all, we are a community foundation, so we are rooted in community. We've been around since 1928, so 93 years, yeah. So that's a lot of history. We know a lot about Santa Barbara County, from Santa Maria in North County and all the wonderful communities up there, Guadalupe, Orchid, all the way down the 101 along the south coast to Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, and everything in between in the valley and out to Cuyama. And lots of players, people that are working really hard to improve the quality of life where they live. And so there's a lot of information that's been accumulated in the Santa Barbara Foundation. And I think when we partner with donors, one of the things that we often hear is that the value that we add is that we are able to share that information, not only about who's who and who's doing what, but where is the need? What's really going on? We have, this is something that's very unique to the Santa Barbara Foundation, an Office of Evaluation and Learning. And so we learn every day new things about our community. We collect data, we collect information. So we're not just, transactional, moving money from a donor to, say, a nonprofit organization. We're really working in partnership with the community to figure out, what is it that we need to be paying attention to, and where are those gaps and needs in our community, and then sharing that information back with our donors so that they can make the kinds of investments that they're dreaming to make.
So it's almost like a philanthropic advisory kind of?
In fact, that is a certification that
That is it?
it is.
I
It's
thought I
a
made
real
that up.
thing.
Okay, good.
Yes, we have philanthropic advisors. Yes, and that's
Okay.
what so we have a couple. There are two sides to the house. There's the program side that works with nonprofit organizations that both do grant making, but also we have the collaboration for social impact. And so we're working with nonprofit organizations throughout Santa Barbara County to figure out where what the sector needs. You know, where are the gaps for the sector? What do we need to be doing to provide training or other resources? So that's that side of the house. The other is the philanthropic advisors, who are just ready and waiting and to work with the philanthropists throughout the community who want to make a difference. And we do philanthropic plans. You know, we talk about their legacy, we talk about their interests, and there are so many vehicles to accomplish just donating and contributing financially to your community. And a lot of times people don't just want to contribute financially. They actually want to engage with a nonprofit organization, and we make those connections.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
And I'm just assuming you report, I mean, the results. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, which is a wonderful thing.
We do, and in fact, we're developing reports right now. We love reports. Because we have a lot of data, and so we feel that there's a tremendous responsibility to analyze the data, process the data, distribute the data, communicate it, and so in a way that people can use it, and most importantly, that we are actually moving the needle on some of the real issues that are happening in our community. Yeah.
It's about results.
Exactly.
I have a friend who wrote a book. He was in leadership in nonprofits for a long time, and he wrote a book called Measuring What Matters.
Yeah.
Have you heard of
No,
that?
but I've been in results-based
Okay,
evaluation
terminology.
sessions this week all week.
Okay, got it. But it is a really important thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked.
Yeah.
Let's talk about response to crisis. We've had a few around here, and in your time here, you came in right about the time where there was a response needed to the Thomas Fire and the flood, and then we have COVID.
Right.
Talk about, and I know you've raised $2.3 million or something in your emergency grant program for COVID, but talk about how the Santa Barbara Foundation steps in those times.
So it's. I'm sorry to say that we've gotten pretty good at this disaster relief business, but through practice, we've over the years, living where we live, we're exposed, of course, to natural disasters, and then also always being aware of the crises that exist in our communities too. So our infrastructure is actually set up to be able to mobilize resources very quickly in times of disaster. So the Thomas Fire and debris flow, one of the first things we did was we stood up a disaster relief fund, and we partnered with the United Way of Santa Barbara County, and they were able to provide something that we didn't have the expertise in and didn't have the infrastructure to do, and so we knew we didn't need to do that, and that's the beauty of partnerships. They made grants and gave financial assistance to individuals and families, while we focused on the nonprofit sector. And we did that both in the immediate wake of the disaster and then all the way through the recovery period. And the Thomas Fire and debris flow had a beginning, there was a middle, and there's somewhat of an end, in that we were able to kind of map out that process and what needs to happen each step of the way. With the pandemic, there was no roadmap for this. This was a complete unknown, and we didn't know how long it was going to last, who was going to be affected, how they were going to be affected. And it was, it was really hitting people financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I mean, it was something we had just never seen before. So we stood up our fund again. We partnered with our partners at the United Way. They mobilized the resources to get the dollars to individuals and families, and we did nonprofits. We also, this time, knowing that this was a much, much bigger scale problem that was affecting, it was a global crisis, we reached out to the philanthropic community right away in Santa Barbara County. And it was, I mean, if there's a silver lining, there was just something incredible that happened one day in March of last year when we proposed the idea of a collaborative, a funders collaborative. So we knew we were going to be doing our fundraising for the Community Disaster Relief Fund, but we asked the philanthropic community to become partners, and we didn't even know what that meant at the time. But we ended up building this collaborative, and over the course of the last 11 or 12, 13 months now, we've mobilized over $39 million in Santa Barbara County because of all of the just kind-hearted, really dedicated funders that we have in this community. They're family foundations, they're private foundations, they're individuals who just stepped up. And so what we did is we just served as a facilitator for that collaborative. We just tracked what everybody was doing and asked them, would you be willing to provide the data, as we talked about, because that's important to know where the money is going, how much money is going there, where is the need, where are the gaps. And so we were able to really kind of fill in the color around that picture for everybody and make the greatest impact, I think, as a result.
It's amazing. I was reading in 2018, you guys had kind of a 5-year strategic plan, and one of the quotes I read was that you're focused on supporting the most vulnerable population by addressing basic human needs. Talk about that and how, the heart of Santa. Crises aside, if we can for a minute, just your normal operating and your heart for addressing basic human needs.
Yeah, so the Santa Barbara Foundation, we stand on the shoulders of the most amazing philanthropists. You imagine, 93 years. There are so many great people who have stepped forward to help our community, and you can see our footprint, our fingerprints, whatever you want to say that, on every community in Santa Barbara County. And I mean, from hospitals to arts institutions to all schools, everywhere you look, you can see the Santa Barbara Foundation. Over the course of the last 10 years, I would say, there was just this elevated awareness that there's disparity and it's growing and it needs to be addressed. And we're talking about basic needs now. We're talking about being having the 3rd highest child poverty rate in California. In Santa Barbara County, that's crazy. 10% of our community is food insecure. And we're in the breadbasket of America. Like, there's a major disconnect here, and you just can't turn a blind eye to these things. So, so the Santa Barbara Foundation, this was before my time, so I can say I'm really proud of the team that got together and prioritized these basic needs: food, access to food, shelter, and addressing the homelessness issue, behavioral health. And then access to healthcare. Healthcare, 10% of our population is uninsured, and then even more underinsured. And so, you lay a pandemic over just regular times, and our crisis is even greater for families. And then the other part of our strategic plan was to address not just the most vulnerable, but working families, because big part of our life here in Santa Barbara, we've got working families who pay a large percentage, as we all well know, of our salaries to housing. And then we have, if you have kids, you throw them in there, we have childcare costs that are astronomical. Right. And when you put your budget together, and I just actually did this for a presentation, you just put the basics, your house, your food, your childcare, you have nothing left at the end of the day. And our workforce sector here is mostly Tier 3 or service industry. So you've got people trying to work part-time jobs, not having insurance, and having all these expenses that just cost to live in Santa Barbara County. So it's really, the working family is a big priority for us. And I would just say that the pandemic, again, circling back to that, we saw just how close to that edge they are, because we saw more people in food lines. Childcare closed, all the centers closed. Right. That caused a lot of issues for our working families. So that's a big priority for us as well.
So let's take that. So the working families, because what you said is just spot on. I mean, in terms of the reality of what people are facing. Mm-hmm. What's an example of how you would address that? Is it a partnership with a nonprofit, a food bank, or we'll give an example of that?
I love that you led with, is it a partnership? Because I think that partnerships are key to everything that we do. And that's true across all sectors, whether it's government or corporations, when you're trying to make improvements to the quality of life in your community, no one can do it alone. And so partnerships are absolutely critical. I'll take, for example, I'll do two, childcare. We are working with Planning Council and Resource and Referral. There's some amazing organizations here that are working on providing resources to both for-profit and nonprofit childcare partners. And so we are at that table, and we are sponsoring and helping to provide support to keep those coalitions and those collaboratives going, so that we're streamlining resources, we're getting resources to where they need to be at the grassroots level.
And that would bring the cost down.
Yeah, and the other piece that we're working on there is twofold, actually. One is access, so more spots. If you try to, I know this was true of me, and this was on the East Coast when my children were young, but you had to have your child on the list, like at birth, to get them into childcare when they were 2 and 3 years old. And that same situation is here. There's just not enough spots for the number of kids that we have. So, and then you want quality care for your kids, and we have amazing childcare workforce. But I don't know if you've ever looked at being a child care worker, but it's probably not going to sustain most lifestyles. That, yeah. So, and then you have, again, you lay a pandemic over something like that. A lot of the child care workforce lives in other places. And so say you take the Thomas Fire and debris flow, where you don't have access to get to our area. Now your workforce has been cut off. And with the pandemic, centers closed, and you have a workforce that has been has sort of evaporated. We're trying to rebuild that as well. So addressing the workforce, addressing access, addressing quality, all of those things are what we work on as we focus on childcare as an issue. With workforce development, right now we just partnered with the Workforce Investment Board and the chambers to do a survey of how businesses, and we're including nonprofit organizations being one of the largest employers in our county, in that, to look to see how the pandemic affected businesses. And then we will be developing out of that strategies with our partners at Hancock and lots of other places to figure out how we can rebuild the workforce and reinforce the workforce as we move forward out of this pandemic. So,
wow.
Just a couple of examples there.
No, that's great. As you look out, and now that you're the leader, but as you look out 5 or 10 years, what do you see? I mean, in your mind's eye, in terms of, I mean, you've talked about a lot, but is there anything kind of that stands out that if you'd love to see happen in the next 5 or 10 years for Santa Barbara Foundation?
For the foundation? Well, I'm not sure if I'm a realist with a dose of optimism or an optimist grounded in realism. I'm not really sure, but I do tend to have a little bit of optimism in my view. It keeps me going every day. But I do think that what I see, what I've seen since in the time that I've been in Santa Barbara County, we have unbelievably strong nonprofit organizations. We had the benefit of working with city and county government through this process, and we have some amazing civil servants in this community. I also had the opportunity to work with our sister foundations in Ventura, and so the Ventura Community Foundation, and then in San Luis Obispo. And so Vanessa Bechtel and Heidi McPherson are the leaders there, and we've talked a lot about, it's great to work in our own communities and to break down silos and build partnerships and strengthen that social fabric to be able to address issues going forward. But we aren't ourselves we are if we look at ourselves in a silo, but we're not. We are connected to our surrounding region, and so to the extent that we're able to take some of these issues and look at them regionally, I think we will also be stronger in the next 5 to 10 years.
So you're thinking,
yeah,
bigger in terms of working together with these other geographic
I think
areas.
that we would be better off if we did that. Yes.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
How did you get into all this? I mean, what was your background? How did you decide, or what happened to your heart where you decided, I'm going to go into this kind of work as an executive?
It's a great question. So I was a finance major. I wanted to, I liked finance. My mother told me that's what I should do with my life, so that's what I did at 17. What do you know? So I was in the 80s, so I was at a Jesuit school. It was mostly male dominated. My class I was one of the few females, and we were in a class, being the Jesuits, we were talking about homelessness, and it was an ethics class, and it was an elective. And I love school. I just listened. I did what I was, I tried not to memorize, regurgitate, and forget, as one of my teachers kept saying, it's not a good idea to do that. In this one class, though, we had a debate about homelessness, and it was the first time that I felt emotion, let's just say that. Blood boiling was kind of another way to describe it, because I was surprised to learn that people were actually had the view that most people that were homeless should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they'd be fine if they just did that. And I thought, everyone is born into the situation they're born into, and not everyone is as lucky as somebody else. So you don't always have the resources to be able to do that. And so I was really kind of enraged by that moment, and it was a turning point, because I was back at my apartment with my roommates, ranting and raving, and one of them stopped me in my tracks when she said, "What are you going to do about it?"
Good question.
Yeah, and I said, I actually really, it was a turning point. I wanted to do the Peace Corps, but my mother, she said, "You've never been out of Baltimore or Washington, D.C. is where I'm from, so you probably shouldn't go to another country right now." And so I ended up doing some volunteer work in Colorado, running a soup kitchen and an outreach center with some volunteers, and doing some work there, and then really got to know the nonprofit sector. And I thought, well, this is really great. I can broker resources, not on Wall Street, not somewhere else, but in a bank or whatever, but I could do it with, in the nonprofit sector. And so that's how I discovered it. That's how I fell in love with it. And then I came back to the East Coast and became a community organizer, where I learned about the power of the human spirit. I mean, I worked with so many people throughout the state of Maryland on water quality issues, but it was really about their passion for making life better for themselves, their families, and their communities, and what they could do if they were supported with tools. And so leadership development, community organizing, seeing transformation in communities as a result of people coming together with those tools. And I thought, well, providing tools and providing resources is just what you need to mobilize, people to make change, and we can do anything. I really believe that. Yeah. That's the optimism. Now you're seeing it come through.
We should make a commercial out of this. but it sounds like you're in your sweet spot. I mean, because you're using a little of the finance
and the business
thing,
yeah,
the
I
business
love that.
thing.
Yeah.
But then you have a heart, and you're into organizing and together. It's great. I think what happened to me was my heart was broken for what I saw. And it's like you can't go back. I mean, maybe
you can't unsee that.
You can't unsee it. And it's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm cooked. I was actually in finance too. But once it happened to me, I was like, okay, I'm doing this, kind of thing. But it's almost like a little bug you get.
It's a calling.
It's a calling. It is a calling.
Yes.
How do you liking Santa Barbara?
Oh, what's not to like? It's so beautiful. I know.
We got a lot of wildlife going on here, but
I know. It makes me just wish that I could, everyone that I know in the whole world could come and see it. So, I feel really blessed and privileged to be here. Yeah.
Well, we're thankful for you.
No, thank you.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.